There is a cancer eating at the Imperium. With each decade it advances deeper, leaving drained dead worlds in its wake. This horror, this abomination, has thought and purpose that functions on an unimaginable galactic scale, and all we can do is try to stop the swarms of bioengineered monsters it unleashes upon us almost by instinct. We have given the horror a name to salve our fears. We call it the Tyranid race, but if it is aware of us at all, it must know us only as prey. The Outer Dark is a mysterious domain of unknowable horror. Each expedition hoping to pierce the veil of darkness thwarted without ever having glimpsed beyond our understanding. Our own galaxy beset by untold malevolent entities birthed from its malice. Only a single species has encroached from outside, dragging a ravenous hunger in its wake, unsated from its prior origins. For today, we shall elucidate the Gestalt organism which feasts on the unenlightened, the apex state of life within this remorseless existence. The children of the stars, the Tyranids. The true origins of the Tyranid species are known, even to my understanding, as one of their disciples. All that can be gleaned is their own galaxy to which they were birthed is far from the Milky Way, its tendrils traversing through the vacuum of space from every corner which surrounds our galaxy. This fact alone suggests all that remains within the far reaches of the universe is the kindred of the Tyranid species. Traveling in groups of bioships housing thousands of lesser organisms, these voidcraft are alike to a swarm of locusts, such living fleets without the use of warp travel, patiently drifting across the void until finding upon a worthy feast. Their specialized Narval hive ships, able to achieve faster than light travel when within the lifeless void. When within the gravitic fields of star systems, these otherwise defenseless vessels rely on sublight speed to prevent overwhelming their navigational sensors. Analyzing electromagnetic signals to locate planets burgeoning with life across vast interstellar distances, the Narvals manipulate the star system's gravitic presence to create a compressed tunnel of space-time to allow its fleet to travel. Using organically induced propulsion to continue their ventures to their prize, as long as decades can pass before a hive fleet strikes its target. Though their gravitic manipulations often herald earthquakes, solar flares, and natural disasters as a sign of a planet's doom. Crafting new beings within their reproduction chambers within, such thralls are disgorged on unsuspecting worlds in droves under the command of the hive ship to which they were spawned. Each bioship connected to the hive fleet has a shared consciousness. Each tendril migration roams the stars in search of biomass to be consumed and assimilated to craft new Tyranid lifeforms. Exponentially reproducing with no understandable end goal, the objectives of the Children of the Stars are unknowable to mortal beings. Its intelligence likely more ancient than even the Necron species, having conquered entire galaxies beyond our comprehension. Harvesting meager species to briefly sate their endless hunger, each Tyranid bioform works in unison to rapidly absorb ecosystems, populations, and bioresources in efforts to repeat the cycle until all fiefdoms of the galaxy are picked clean of life. Each hive fleet consisting of millions of organisms evolving new mutations to best adapt to their environment. Tyranids do not fight for self-defense, conquest, or preservation of sentimental icons, only for their next meal. Migrations of each hive fleet harrying even the most technologically advanced and militarily minded holdouts. This hyper-evolved species consumes all in its wake, regardless if hued of green, merged with mechanism, or flavored with mutation. Each hive mind manifesting a phenomena known as the shadow in the warp. Every single creature under its command acts as a conduit for its will to spread across hundreds of light years of galactic space. Each splinter of its consciousness developing their own tactics and methods to best their foes. Once reconnected to the greater hive mind, the minds of the Tyranids are once more subsumed by the greater whole, tethered by their combined psychic bond. The larger the bioform, the more complex their decision-making, with a few exceptions. The smallest performing but a single task of their design, with no thought for rebellion, disobedience, or perhaps even sentient thought. Synaptically communicating with their kindred using a form of telepathy, the command class of the Great Devourer reorganized their forces with unmatched speed and efficiency. The death of such champions severing the connection to the hive mind and plunging their forces into disarray. Ensuring synaptic control by dispersing the hive mind's consciousness across multiple commanders. The higher up the chain of command our enemy's target, the more exploitable the Hivemind's control of its thralls. The superorganism far from the front lines to preserve its intelligence, none have ever glimpsed the true master of the Tyranid species, as it is more than likely it does not even exist within our own galaxy. Likely exerting its will from beyond, funneling the experiences of Hive Tyrants, Norn Queens, and other high-ranking champions back to its consciousness. Perhaps the Milky Way and its denizens are merely a morsel when compared to the civilizations it has prior devoured. Laying claim to all corners of the void in efforts to sate their hunger, the Tyranids are the single most patient predators of the stars, their cold voyages rewarded with warm vitae which slavers their bladed talons. While some speculate the species to be fleeing an even greater foe beyond the Pale, or cataclysmic disaster which harries their domains, all that matters is that the children of the stars shall not relent in their consumption of the Milky Way by any means necessary. Drawn from the outer dark by a flash of light emitted with the destruction of the Pharos device of Sophar during the Great Civil War of the Horus Heresy, little would the so-called heroes of the Imperium realize that their sacrifice had condemned billions to death. Seizing upon the Astronomicon transmission of the Emperor as a tether to draw the Hivemind's thralls to its source, the first official recorded incident of their exposure to humanity was made during 745.1041 within the eastern fringe of the galaxy. Though unsubstantiated rumors insist the Inquisition has been aware of the threat since the 35th millennium. Awakening from their hibernation, ready to plunge the ocean world of Tyran into disarray, the first Hive Fleet to harry the Imperium left an indelible mark on humanity's psyche. All subsequent sightings of such armies designated titles named after humanity's legends of monstrous entities of folklore. Hive Fleet Behemoth, as it would be known, clad in black chitin and red flesh, struck alike to a hammer blow against Tyran. Inquisitor Fidus Cryptman documenting their variant bioforms and tactics as the foremost expert on what he termed the Tyranids in honor of Tyran's sacrifice. Repelled by the combined strength of the entire chapter of the Ultramarines, aided by the Imperial Navy during their defense of their homeworld of Macragge, their venerated pedigree was proven superfluous in the face of such merciless foes. Chapter Master Marneus Calgar severely wounded during his clash with the Swarmlord which led the advance. The entire first company of the chapter was sacrificed as elements of the Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, Space Wolves and Blood Drinkers purged what remained of its tendrils which attempted to regroup on far distant worlds. Behemoth, though broken, separating into splinter fleets which would ravage the stars in their attempt to achieve resurgence. The brazen actions of such a terrible foe, though inflicting a deep wound, had proven to be an ineffective strategy to oppose humanity entire. Hive Fleet Kraken besetting the Imperium during 993.1041. This time the Great Devourer approached a more widespread assault, dividing its forces piecemeal to better strike simultaneous targets. Forces of the Space Marines, such as the Scythes of the Emperor, Salamanders, Raven Guard, Imperial Fists, Death Watch and Ultramarines confronting the net of slaughter cast around the Segmentum Ultima. Even the Eldar of Craftworld Iandan resisted the onslaught of the Kraken, eventually blunting its advance. The splinters of the Kraken, now ravaging colonies of the Tau Empire within the eastern fringe. A mere 6 years following the decisive battle of Ikar IV, a new Hive Fleet designated Leviathan arrived far from the staging grounds of all prior campaigns. Attacking from the southern portion of the galaxy, hurtling towards the defenses of the Segmentum Solar, though Inquisitor Cryptman sought to distract the Hive Fleet by diverting them to the orc-infested Octarius sector of the Segmentum Ultima, such battles have only emboldened the Leviathan. Empowered by the vast orc biomass consumed from the Octarius War, Hive Fleet Leviathan's most infamous deeds would be made within the Baal system, fiefdom of the Blood Angel Space Marines. Chapter Master Luis Dante, rallying every available successor of the Great Angel's gloried legacy, the Sanguinary Brotherhood gave their lives dearly, with several chapters rendered extinct in their defense of Sanguinius' domains. Leviathan's majesty, torn apart with the birth of the Great Rift across the stars, were it not for the empiric storms of the Immaterium, Baal would surely have been consumed. The demonic hordes of the Blood God, Khorne, further exacerbating Leviathan's feast, providing no sustenance when consumed. Withdrawing its ravaged forces with the arrival of the Primarch Rabute Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade fleet, Leviathan, though denied their banquet of flesh, set its sights upon the throne world of humanity itself. The Emperor's custodians taking drastic actions in attempts to stall its advance, entire surrounding rings of planets were scoured of life to deny the Leviathan its morsels. The forces of the Avenging Sun holding the line as Leviathan strikes from ever more vulnerable positions. The life cycle of the Tyranids, requiring the consumption of all forms of life as we know it. Each planet provides a veritable bounty of mass, capable of being converted into the majesty of the hive mind. Every bedrock, riverbed, and skyline systematically parted from their mortal coil within mere days of toil. Entire ecosystems are drained of their vitality. The Great Devourer's hunger sated for a moment before returning with renewed need. Husks of worlds left as airless tombs unable to be terraformed or salvaged for any practical purpose. Only the demonic thralls of chaos and living metal constructs of the Necrons are immune to the Tyranids' feasting. Beginning their conquests with subtle infiltration, whether by use of a Hive Fleet-created broodlord or fragment of an existing former Genestealer cult, each world destined to be found upon is screened for viability and means to undermine its defenses. Vanguard drone ships and lictors, paving the way for Genestealer patriarchs to set roots within the deepest recesses of population centers. These agents, perfectly crafted for their tasks, use concealment, espionage, and manipulation to ensure their objectives are realized. Vanguard drone ships relying on their speed and minimal psychic signatures to evade detection. Once depositing their cargo, they shall conduct reconnaissance of local systems to better prepare for the eventual Hive Fleet invasion. Propagating through gene splicing with the native population in order to burgeon secret societies far from prying eyes, the cunning servants of the Children of the Stars pave the way for their overlords by undermining the societies within which they lurk. Feeding information back to their hive mind once synaptic nodes are within range. Each lictor which successfully evades capture or eradication provides crucial insight to the hive mind in its planning of future deployments. With infestation complete, the Hive Fleet synaptic nodes disrupt warp transmissions for several light years of range, the hive mind's casting of their shadow in the warp, severing astrotelepathic communications. Now cut off from calling for reinforcements, the hive ships descend into low orbit, raining down mycetic spores filled with microbes and microorganisms which break down soil, oceanic, floral, and faunal components. Optimizing the planet's ecosystem for consumption, next, Gaunts and Gargoyles lead the charge against the planet's defenders. Their pincering between Genestealer cultists and the swarms of the Tyranid Hive Fleet overwhelming enemy positions. Superior numbers, always acceptable, as even in death each fallen Tyranid shall once more return to its bioships to be born anew. Though most Tyranid bioforms do not possess ranged weaponry, their bladed limbs prove more than sufficient in culling their foes. Seeing sentient creatures as nothing more than livestock, communication is a pointless venture considering their standing. The thought of surrender or appeasement inconsequential considering that all Tyranids serve the whims of their hive mind alone. More advanced bioforms such as Morlocks, Trigons, Lictors, Carnifexes, and Raveners targeting more dangerous prey. As capillary towers and spore chimneys connect to the bioships in orbit, the destruction of a planet is all but assured. Extracting mineral wealth, subterranean lifeforms, deep-sea dwellers, and airborne microbes alike once the planet has been secured. Ripper swarms devour everything in sight, whether alive or dead, before plunging themselves into reclamation pools beneath the capillary towers. Genestealer cultists plunged alongside the Ripper swarms into such depths to be digested. The tidal flows of a planet's oceans are modified to filter maritime species into the capillary towers, for once such stages of consumption are achieved, nothing can be salvaged from such doomed worlds. Exterminatus, the only recourse for our enemies once we have achieved subjugation. The longer a Hive Fleet is allowed to feast, the more resources are at its disposal to craft new bioforms to enact the hive mind's will. Each hive ship and their respective escort ships fed by the capillary towers until their prey world is picked clean of life. The death of entire Tyranid armies a mere trifle, should the campaign achieve victory, for such carrion will once again be recycled into new life. The lessons learned of each conquest, expanding the experience and intelligence of the hive mind. Hive Fleets burgeon not only in number but size, as the organic materials gleaned from their spoils are put to efficient use. Mutating from simple void-faring organisms to vast warships should their storage vesicles be amply fed. Even the capillary towers are broken down once their funneling of materials is complete, so that not a scrap of biomass is wasted. Compressing planetary atmospheres into liquid or solid states through some unknown mechanism, the Tyranids are nothing if not conscientious in their methodical approach to depriving entire star systems of all forms of life. Identifying new genetic patterns derived from its victims to further experiment with new terrifying bioforms. Entire Space Marine chapters have given their lives dearly to prevent the consumed progenoid glands and genetic materials of their primarchs from merging with the hive mind. Withholding adaptations until the optimal time to be developed and deployed. None can comprehend how many variants of the Star Children's majesty remain undiscovered as their tendrils continue to invite us to be part of their glory. The psychic characteristics of the hive mind, wholly separate from the Immaterium as we know it, much alike to their biological coding and unknown materials which defy any known catalogue of our experience, the Tyranids' esoteric powers are wholly other. Smothering entire star systems with disruption fields, which prove anathema to the Immaterium. This psychostatic, known simply as the Shadow in the Warp, is an apt title to describe its mysterious constitution. Whether an intentional broadcast, or rather an aura exuded by the hive mind, it matters not. The outcome remains the same, insofar that when a hive fleet approaches, its targets panic as mental anguish and despair spread across the population. Psychically attuned species, such as the Eldari, suffering the most from its effects. Should a psyker attempt to exert their abilities within its clutches, they shall suffer cerebral hemorrhages, or worse afflictions, as a response. Billions of alien voices, clawing at their minds, attuned to pitches which drive their listeners insane. Only the most strong-willed witchbreed can withstand such trauma, often parroting alien pronouncements without knowing that they utter such ramblings. Astropaths and navigators, despairing at their sudden severing from the ties of the Immaterium. Their lack of safety, in both physical terms, with no means to call for support, nor psychic communion with their peers, unsettles them to their core. Isolation the calling card, which presages annihilation. When the effect of the Shadow in the Warp is felt, a planet is already doomed. Generations of gene-stealers having typically proliferated within the depths, as hordes of Star Children loom on the horizon. The synaptic web of the hive mind, extending across the hive fleets. Planetary invasion swarms, gene-stealer broods, and entire swathes of space. The swarm function in perfect unison, as orders are seamlessly and instantly coordinated. Communal sentience feeding back into the hive mind through chains of dominance hierarchies. Each specialized synapse creature benefiting from enhanced brain function via cortex alterations, reroutes the hive mind's desires, alike to a cacophony from beyond. The true scale of the hive mind's collective brain power on a scale which is truly unquantifiable. Without the use of localized synapse creatures, the barrage of information would prove overwhelming for those exerted of its will. Commanders severed from the hive mind's influence, unleashing the flood of raw power unto its lessers, overwhelming their minds unto death. Junior bioforms fare no better should their connection be fully disconnected from the hive mind, now relying purely on instinct, with no means to decipher logic as they descend into animalistic rampages. Synapse creatures, typically potent psychers as we understand the term. While their methods of such feats don't incur the wrath of the Chaos entities, it is likely we will never truly understand the means nor power source to which they derive such talents. Each synapse creature channeling the hive mind's power into decipherable conditioning methods, while Dominion accelerates their thrall's aggression into new heights of savage fury. Catalyst manipulates their force's metabolic systems to aid in ignoring severe wounds. The Horror, allowing a synapse creature to flood the minds of their enemies with panic. Onslaught, meanwhile, allows the wielder to guide its thrall's weapons fire towards high-value targets. Paroxysm, triggering the nerve receptors of its target with unspeakable agonies. The Psychic Scream harnesses their hive mind's fury into a sonic blast, overwhelming the minds of those caught within its range, whilst the Warp Blast ability forms such power into a psychic force which can vaporize its opposition outright. The hive fleets of the Great Devourer, each encompassing different strategies and mutations to best enact their objectives. Only 3 have burgeoned to a size capable of terrorizing vast swathes of the galaxy. The first sighted minor hive fleet by the Imperium of Man, known as Tiamat, sighted during the 35th millennium. This likely probing strike for all subsequent Tyranid invasions, though conquering numerous worlds, did not consume all life from their ecosystems. Tyrannoforming the jungle planet of Xiaphora within the Tiamat system into some kind of psychic resonance device, which perplexes scholars of the Imperium to this day. This heavily guarded world is the target of regular Deathwatch strikes, perpetrated by Watch Fortress Hultmote. Adapting their chitinous grey and white carapaces to protect from energy weapons fire, always attacking in dense clusters. Their diamond-hard exoskeletons form living shield walls as they advance to war. Another Hive Fleet incursion made during the 36th millennium, known as Hive Fleet Ouroboros. The writings of the Cardinal of Thracian Primaris, Miriamulus the Elder, describe winged abominations descending from the skies, scouring his fiefdom of the Helican sector. The Ouroboros Wars, spearheaded by the Space Wolves and Warlord Titan pilot of the Mechanicus Cranus. More recent accounts of its resurgence within the Thracian sector and Warzone Lavinia cite these blue-hued aerial experts armed with crude bioplasma spewing alternatives to more modernized Tyranid weaponry. Hive Fleet Colossus, entering the eastern fringe of the Ultima Segmentum during the 38th millennium. Creatures bearing similarity to centaurs, likely of the Zoat species, roam the void within their voidcraft, resembling stone. Communing with other species telepathically, claiming to be slaves, escaping servitude from their masters. The Ordo Xenos declared Colossus Xenos Horrificus, seeing to their purge during 226.M39 during the Zoroastra Attila Wars of the Helican Crusade. Rumoured to be resurgent in their strength during 897.M41 upon the civilized world of Fresiax, Wolf-Lord Bran Redmore of the Space Wolves dispatched 2 Grey Hunter squads to the spaceport of Montberg to aid the planet's evacuation before Exterminatus was conducted. Only 6 Astartes surviving Colossus's assault of Fresiax. Though Imperial High Command demanded them stripped of all honours for disobeying their orders, Redmore instead promoted them to his personal Wolf Guard. Hive Fleet Behemoth, the architects of the first major offensive endured by the galaxy. This juggernaut, which sought to target the most prestigious vanguard of the Imperium, attempted a gambit to demoralize humanity. Sundered within a single year of its deployment to the Ultima Segmentum, due to the tenacious efforts spearheaded by the Ultramarines during the First Tyrannic War, by 745.M41, little remained of their legacy, thanks to the efforts of the White Scars and Navis Imperialis, scouring them from the void. Splinter Fleet fragments of its former glory, such as the Calfstrain Epsilon, Court of the Nephilim King, Crimson Moor, Dendrobates, and Cordrex Strain, persisting to this day as unsubtle yet deadly combatants. Hive Fleet Naga, invading the galaxy from the territories of the Eastern Fringe during 801.M41. Their scouring of untold Xenos worlds held by Tau and Eldar defenders have earned it the title of Shinade, the endlessly winding serpent. Supposedly destroyed during 812.M41 by Craftworld's Malantai, Iandan, and Idare. Regardless, the hive mind assimilated dozens of biomass samples, gleaning information on potentially valuable mutations derived from the Eldar breed. Hive Fleet Dagon, considered a splinter of Behemoth, which has harried the Jericho Reach since 812.M41. The Orpheus salient of the Achilles Crusade has suffered the greatest suffering from this tendril's actions, including the extinction of the Freya system. Hive Fleet Gorgon, besetting the Tau Empire during 899.M41. The worlds consumed by its rampage are known henceforth as the Zone of Silence, forcing an alliance of the Imperial Guard and Blueskins to join forces. Commander Farsight and Castellan Krask believing their efforts to have purged Gorgon from the galaxy. Sightings on the agri-worlds of the Pagria system have laid such assertions to rest as they rebuild their strength. Hive Fleet Moloch threatening the agri-world of Jolov during 932.M41 against the Catachan jungle fighters, Mordian Iron Guard, and additional support from the Agathon, Karnak, and Molov regiments. The Vostroyan 9th Old Irascibles falling on Karak Prime during 998.M41 in the wake of the Imperium's defeat. Their detonation of the Hive Primus' nucleonic stack destroyed over 85% of the Hive, leaving what remained to starve during the subsequent winter season, ending the reign of Hive Fleet Moloch forever. Hive Fleet Scarabus embattled against the 9th Cadian Shock Troopers upon the fortress world of Carcassonne during 937.M41. Such is the pedigree of these corpse worshippers, they incurred not a single loss to their companies in their purge of the Tyranids. Hive Fleet Locust invading the imperial world of Ulmor during 945.M41. The Ultramarines combated the Swarm during the Battle of Ulmor, condemning much of the population to death with their late arrival. Hive Fleet Eumenides, confronted by Commander Shadowsun during 990.M41 on the planet of Kitab of the Kepula system. The Raven's Watch chapter of Astartes destroyed their primary synapse node to aid pacifying these green and bronze-clad warriors. Hive Fleet Kraken, more subtle in its methods. During 992.M41, multiple star systems endured its predations, yet the Ultramarines, now replenished in number and prepared for its aggression, systematically diminished the forces of this vast Hive Fleet. Kraken splinter fleets dividing into those attributed as Formant Ultra, Icar Magna, Myril Rex, and Sofa Secundus. The Myril system has endured much suffering as a result, as too did the Space Marines of the Scythes of the Emperor. Hive Fleet Jormungandr, defeated during 995.M41 during the Battle of the Black Nebula by Admiral Vortigern Hanroth. Its predation of unprotected worlds caused its numbers to burgeon across the Falasi, Palangir, and Rortrid sectors. Combining their Mycetic Spore deployments with barrages of debris and asteroids to draw enemy fire, their Raveners, Morlocks, and Trigons burrow deep underground, awaiting critical mass of the fleet before striking. Hive Fleet Leviathan, the most successful vanguard of the Hivemind's conquest. Having learned from Behemoth and Kraken's efforts, its multi-pronged assault during the Third and Fourth Tyrannic Wars have humbled even the Ultramarines. Their slaughter enacted during 997.M41 barely hindered by the Krypton census, which sacrificed worlds across entire segmentums at the cost of hundreds of astropath lives. Forewarned and forearmed, the Imperium nonetheless took heavy casualties, not least amongst the ranks of the Scions of Sanguinius. Its two-pronged assault, alike to a maw within the void, bleeding additional forces of the Ultramarines, Mortifactors, Deathwatch, and untold Astra Militarum regiments who confronted the left half of its invasion on Tarsus Ultra. Baal devastated, as hundreds of angels fell in defense of their Primarch's fiefdom. Now further reinforcements of the Leviathan beset the western fringe of the galaxy, striking outposts across the Segmentum Pacificus. Splinters of the Third Tyrannic War, now dubbed as Kastinov, Adaric, Grail Alpha, Griffon Prime, Praxima Strain, Scarrock Swarm, Solstice Omega, and Tarsus Majoris, little would the Imperium know of the far distant division of Leviathan's might, preparing for another invasion. These tendrils of the Hive Fleet, dubbed Norchelon, Promephor, and Grendulus, the Indomitas Crusade strains under the burden of repelling the Great Devourer from the borders of the Throne World itself. Hive Fleet Medusa ravaging the Ghoul Star sector of space during 998.M41. The Space Wolves chapter defended the ice world of Sadrak alongside the 10th Slovak garrison of the Imperial Guard, forcing them to withdraw from the Imperium's domains. Hive Fleet Hydra awakening prematurely from their slumber during the closing days of the 41st millennium thanks to the meddling of the Poisoned Fang Cabal. Within the eastern spiral of the galactic south, these rapidly regenerating bioforms of purple hues unleashed devastation. Their every death followed by a scream which drew new swarms to their location. Despite the efforts of the White Scars and Imperial forces of Lord General Syvar Deus, it would fall to the Harlequin Mask of the Soaring Spite in coalition with Craftworld Saimhan to repel their advance. Hive Fleet Kronos amassing strength following the creation of the Cicatrix Maledictum. Strange rituals conducted by the Thousand Suns seem to lure the Hive Fleet to specific destinations, though it is uncertain if this is intended to repel or harness their slaughter. The most potent harnessers of the Shadow of the Warp known to exist, their null powers are bolstered by storms of organic missile barrages and ranged weapons fire. Hive Fleet Gamma among the new strains discovered during the era Indomitus. Their ravaging of the death worlds of the Voltis sector and Caligari sector infected as many planets with mycetic spores as feasible. Enduring exterminatus countermeasures made in efforts to stem their spread. Gamma burrowed deep into the planet's surface to survive, awaiting the time for their true Hive Fleet advance to arrive. Hive Fleet Lotan combating the Vectoriums of the Death Guard's 4th and 7th Plague Companies on the world of Desp. This jungle world suffered poisoning by both the Grandfather's Thralls and Venomthropes of the Tyranids. Virus bombs and demonic diseases further despoiling the planet's surface. Upon tasting but a sample of the gory soup that remained, the Hive Fleet recoiled from its corrosive effects, bombarding the planet until only an ocean of toxic slurry too potent for even the Devourer to consume remained. Hive Fleet Typhon, amongst the strangest of all Tyranid forces, this Hive Fleet is the only one to practice cannibalism of rival Hive Fleets, preying on those weakened from their newly conquered worlds. Consuming elements of Hive Fleet Kronos and Leviathan during their joint scouring of the Chalnaf expanse. Once done with its contemporaries, Hive Fleet Typhon devoured the feral world of Yanapad, and now turns its attentions towards the agri-world of Herconayat. Lesser-known fleets such as Agadsta, Arachne, Canfaridae, Carcharodon, Carnivora, Cerberus, Cetu, Charybdis, Chimera, Dagoth, Grendel, Harbinger, Catus, Karkinos, Ladon, Megalodon, Nemesis, Ophidia, Perseus, Proteus, Typhos, Scytalis, Scylla, Titanolysis, Vega, and Xerxes eking out their own legacies across the void. With each passing year, the influence of the Children of the Stars burgeons. The bioforms of the Great Devourer, myriad in their application, variety, and mutations. These gene-spliced apex creatures, grown from the harvested matter of conquered worlds, are the vanguard to which the hive mind prospers. Every weapon, projectile, and appendage bioengineered by the hive mind's boundless ingenuity. Whether biocannon or bladed claw, each is fused to their host into a symbiotic amalgamation. The point to which one begins and another ends, difficult to ascertain with regards to some bioforms. Every one is adapted perfectly for their task, whether as shock troopers, ranged bombardment cannons, or assassins. Tyrannocytes transporting ground forces as a ship-to-surface vessel. Upon impact, their guts disgorge their cargo, only to fill their cavernous bellies with air, in order to float into the skies and rain death with their Death Spitter bioweapons. Biotitans, by far the largest bioform unleashed upon the battlefield in response to war machines deployed by all manner of denizens of the galaxy. These constructs as tall as 30 meters attacked foes with both enormous legs and spewed toxins to corrode and pierce the plating of even the most enormous foes. Norn Queens, regarded as the matriarchs of the Tyranid species, responsible for the birthing of all known forms of life. These biomechanically enhanced breeders manipulate biomass as required by the needs of the Hive Fleet and are housed within vast and well-protected chambers. Large dominatrices, standing almost as tall as a Biotitan, defending their Norn Queen's birthing chamber. These female equivalents of Hive Tyrants exceed their contemporaries' physical strength and are fused with a synaptic warrior bioform to maintain a link to their Norn Queen. Norn Emissaries, carrying out the will of their Norn Queen personally. These massive bioforms combine graceful strength with psychic ability, making them a martial match for even custodians, abducting valuable prey for study by their mistress. Hive Tyrants, standing as the most senior frontline enforcers of the Hive Mind's will. These senior bioforms command entire armies under their sway and share the closest bond to the Hive Mind. Highly mutable, whether armed with wings, heavy plate, bladed arms, or barbed whips. These variant repositories of the Gestalt collective mind of the Tyranid consciousness, such as the Swarm Lord, have humbled many a champion of the Void in single combat, whether they be Space Marine, Eldar, or Greenskin. Maleceptors, exerting psychic projectiles from its mind as a conduit of the Hive Mind psychic power. Small arms fire is consumed by its psychic barriers, as cranial explosions are induced onto any mortal who veers too close to its presence. Their torsos embedded with orbs of encephalic tissue which distills the Hive Mind psychic presence. These blind beasts are too valuable to be deployed carelessly, and thus are accompanied by zoanthropes and neurothropes to bolster their gifts. Broodlords, the methods to which new Genestealer cults' legacies are born. These planetary insurgents sire entire generations of offspring to undermine planetary societies, and should they be confronted in single combat, their claws are plenty to fell their enemies. Independent and highly intelligent creatures, should a Broodlord be slain, their pure-strain children shall continue their work, often extending their legacies as the patriarchs of untold splinter cults to follow, spread far and wide across the stars. Tyrant Guard bioforms, a specialized breed made to defend their Hive Tyrant overlord. Their immense size, tough chitinous plating, and formidable martial prowess makes them difficult to injure, let alone slay. Their minds utterly subsumed by their Hive Tyrant, rendering them blind should their master fall in battle. Many an Adeptus Mechanicus Magi believes their origin to be derived from Space Marine physiology, marking them as a shameful reminder of the Corpse Emperor's failings. Carnifexes, also known as Screamer Killers by the humans, lumbering into battle like to a living tank. No fortress nor armored column is safe when confronted by such enormous foes, as their armor shrugs off all but the mightiest of weapons. The equivalent in scale to a Space Marine dreadnought, while some specialize in brute force, best utilized in dismembering armored vehicles, others produce toxins, which specialize in culling vast swathes of infantry once fired alike to artillery from their shoulders. Tervigons, carrying dozens of Termagants into battle. Though typically stationed aboard bioships to guard from invasion, if needed for frontline duties, they are deployed within the backlines until needed to breach fortress walls and disgorge their spawn into the thick of fighting. Haraspexes, created only to eat and nothing more. This latter deployed bioform hastens tyrannoforming by tearing apart sturdier prey such as Space Marine corpses, rending through ceramite and sinew with its 3 sets of jaws. Capable of dispatching enemy platoons and armored vehicles if necessary due to its mighty constitution, its ravenous appetite gorges on the dead and dying without pause until regurgitating its spoils into the nearest digestion pool. Biovores, launching spore mines from afar which grow from their engorged bodies. It is believed such a mutation is evolved from greenskin genetic materials as an adaptation of their proclivity to utilize squigs and rudimentary explosives to deadly effect. Pyrovore variants, feasting on the dead and wounded to sate their gnawing hunger. Their fireballs cast from flamespurt bioweapons, while deadly, can also be detonated should they be injured, causing acidic immolation to spray across any within their range. Exocrines, controlled by the bioplasmic cannon biomorphs, mounted on their spines. These enormous, mobile artillery platforms deliver long-range firepower to forward advances, sundering even the most menacing of foes. Tyrannofexes, similarly carrying heavy weapons which in contrast they are fused to their torsos. Only the arsenal of Biotitans exceeds their sheer firepower capabilities, as they lead broods of Termagants to saturate enemy positions with overwhelming suppression. Wielding acid spray, flesh borer, and rupture cannons to destroy their foes. This potent bioform also benefits from anti-infantry weaponry embedded within its thorax, but is ponderously slow to reach its opposition. Sporocysts, embedding themselves into the surface of the planet before their spore chimneys pollute the air with microorganisms. Their use of spore mines and mucilid spores protect them from harm, and are on occasion reinforced by the hive mind with additional sporocysts in order to create airborne minefields to stall enemy advances. Raveners, a combination of both Ripper and Tyranid warrior traits. These subterranean hunters burrow beneath enemy lines before launching surprise attacks on lightly armored encampments. Zoanthropes, the most psychically gifted genus of the bioforms. Their enormous swollen brain-to-body ratio belies their talent for esoterica, as they unleash psychic barrages on their foes whilst floating high above the ground. Said to have evolved having consumed Eldari DNA from Craftworld Iyanden during the invasion of Hive Fleet Kraken. Should such speculation be true, it bears credence to the notion that even should a Hive Fleet be repelled or fragmented, their insight is regarded as transmitted to their hive mind in order to capitalize on the traits of their foes. Their next stage of evolution, deemed as Neurothropes. These larger variants are said to descend from the being known as the Doom of Malan Tai, and are capable of healing nearby Zoanthropes and galvanizing their nearby psychic power into terrifying force. Venomthropes, floating across the battlefield, spewing their gas-filled bladders to kill the ecosystem which surrounds them. When unleashed in large numbers, their poisons kill all life which grows and induces nausea, vomiting, and muscle spasms to those who breathe their toxins. Neurotyrants, harnessing the power of the shadow in the warp as an organic, mobile command center. This support bioform hovers over terrain, exerting its psychic talents over its kin to better coordinate their efforts. All non-Tyranid forces within its presence, rendered mad by agonies caused by its raw power. Often, several smaller neuraloids accompany it into battle, deciphering the desires of their foes to best capitalize on their fears, ambitions, and frailties. Malanthropes, bearing similarities to both lictors and zoanthropes, despite being twice the size of the latter. These rarely seen bioforms following the final tedium of the Ripper Swarm's toil, collect genetic materials from fallen foes which may benefit the hive mind. Scouring the battlefield in hopes of gleaning templates which may lead to future adaptations. Though inevitably reabsorbed into the biomass of their hive fleet, their consumption of promising samples which are digested and stored in their torso sacs are also a boon for their respective Norn Queen. Trigons, exceeding the scale of even Carnifexes, similar in appearance to the Ravener bioforms. These gargantuan serpents lead tunnel swarms consisting of lictors and hormigons below, as their vibrations create bioelectric currents which stun their foes. Morlocks, a mutation of the Trigon, which are more worm-like and lacking sight. Their short claws excel at tunneling efficiency at the cost of martial skill, and are utilized to create subterranean complexes to better funnel forces into ambush positions. Swallowing their prey whole, which are broken down over days of digestion, their sensory abilities to glean information from air pressure and surface tremors allows them to locate targets. The Hive Guard, protecting valuable structures, such as capillary towers with ranged weapons. These heavily armored warriors establish firing positions for their impaler cannons, which fire shard beasts that track enemy positions mid-flight. Tyranid warriors, the workhorse of the Synapse creatures. Their middling connection to the Hive Swarm allows for coordination of their forces, whether striking within melee or ranged firing positions. Lictors, among the most widespread specialists of their breed, these lone assassins, bearing chameleonic skin, can blend seamlessly into their surroundings before striking their prey. Ambushing convoys, military leaders, or other high-value targets. Their equivalent of commando raids aid in the initial stages of Genestealer insurgency, as their consumption of enemy brain matter forewarns them of exploitable vulnerabilities. Gaunts, the most basic bioforms which attack in swarms. These underlings benefiting from additional adrenal sacs, spike rifles, and bladed claws. On occasion, overwhelm enemy positions with sheer numbers, clogging the machines of war with their slain. Additional variants such as Hellgaunts, Terragaunts, Slashgaunts, Razorgaunts, Crygaunts, Exagaunts, Malgaunts, Mortargaunts, Rendergaunts, Protogaunts, Lashgaunts, Genogaunts, and Toxagaunts, adapted from myriad hive fleets. This equivalent of cannon fodder is not to be underestimated, especially when attacking in groups. Termagaunts, specializing in ranged attacks and standing upright rather than on all fours alike to its gaunt cousins. Though originally designed to patrol the arterial passages of bioships, they have found new purpose as frontline infantry units. Accompanying Tyranid warriors into battle, protecting them from harm by firing suppressive fire at their foes. These cunning creatures, uncommonly for bioforms, retain an instinct for self-preservation and prefer to attack from vantage points. The first to flee a battle should their connection to the hive mind be severed, Within underground caves or ruined defense posts, Termagants form nests together, ready to fire their spike rifles, strangle webs, devourers, and shard launchers at anyone who attempts to breach their shelter. Hormagaunts, created from the template of Termagants as a means to mutate a melee-oriented alternative. These more heavily armored variants of a regular Gaunt cut their foes to ribbons, now with accelerated speed, strength, and aggression. Single-mindedly pursuing their prey, with no thought for fatigue or injury. Swarms of these brutes feed upon their prey to fuel their next advance, as their hyperactive metabolism mimics but a fragment of the hive mind's appetite. Incredibly short-lived as a result of their adaptations, often Hormagaunts are the first to be deployed by the initial Mycetic Spore invasion in large numbers, left to their own devices rather than a centralized command to wreak havoc while they can. Neurogaunts are particularly rarely sighted subspecies of Gaunt, which tends to the Hive Fleet's synapse network. These support bioforms act as a relay connection point to the hive mind and protect more senior synapse creatures from harm. Hosting parasitical neurocytes which extend the range of the hive mind's influence. Larger node beasts lead such Neurogaunt squads into battle when necessary, often in defense of key positions rather than to advance on enemies. Barbgaunts, acting as small artillery platforms which attack at the forefront of the Hive Guard and Biovore assaults. Their back-mounted barb launchers require 5 limbs to steady their aim as they unleash long-range devastation. The Von Ryan Leapers, combining genetic material from both Lictors and Hormagaunts to create an agile ambush predator. Unlike Lictors, these creatures attack in groups, as their Leaper talons rend flesh and armor alike to parchment. Gargoyles, the aerial equivalent of the Gaunt's genus, though their legs are atrophied into stumps to allow better aerodynamics, their array of ranged weaponry rains destruction from the skies as their brethren attack from below. Harpies, developed from the Trigon genus, working alongside gargoyles to achieve aerial dominance. The cysts which festoon their undersides rain spore mines from high, whilst their shrieks disorientate those who attempt to flee. Armed with twin-linked Stranglethorn cannons, heavy venom cannons, and scything talons, their strafing runs and daring dive attacks harry foes both beyond and beneath a planet's atmosphere. Hive Crones, developed from Harpy stock to target enemy aircraft in order to achieve aerial superiority. Its armaments known as Tentaclids explode on impact, whilst their drool cannons release acidic fluid on land-based enemies. Tasked with protecting bioships within the void of space from smaller enemy aircraft, their claws can tear open armored vehicles if needed, all the better to expose their crew into the void of space or drag them plummeting to the surface. Ripper Swarms, designed to devour DNA and nutrients from their surroundings, though not created for combat, they are nonetheless a terrifying foe to encounter when charging in swarms numbering in the thousands. Cortex Leeches, by far the smallest bioform available to the swarm. These feeders manipulate the brains of host victims by inserting their feelers through their ears, noses, and eyes, controlling them as meat shields to defend larger kin. Several bespoke species, such as the Nautiloid, Viragon, Vitiator, Cerebor, Dactylis, Haradan, Malefactors, Dimacharion, Psychophagus, Dimacharion, Thornbacks, and other species, adding to the numberless amount of variations which the bioforms can take. None truly know the full extent to every single mutation. For in the end, every bioform is merely a means to which the hive mind extracts its meals to provide nourishment for its endless majesty. And if needed, the universe as we know it, beyond our understanding, has already proven insufficient to stem its hunger. So what chance do you mere morsels think you have denying its feast?
To defeat the Tyranids, we must study them. There's more than a few million lives at stake here. More than 50 worlds. The whole of the Imperium of Man could be wiped out by these beasts. They must be stopped at any cost. Any cost.
This has been a tale of the Children of the Stars, read by the Disseminator. The tendrils of the Great Devourer are vast, encompassing swathes of the galaxy in order to subsume what is rightfully ours. Experimentation is crucial for the Tyranids' prosperity. Adherence to mundane methods while previously having achieved success, damned to stultification should innovation be avoided. A line must be drawn in your own life, wherein you choose to embrace the dangers of change whilst restraining the reliability of comfort, for no one can achieve greatness should they not heed the wisdom of both. So whether you are cautious or brazen in your testing of trial and error, know that you must adapt if you are to thrive. Yet remain aware of the confines of prosperity, lest you delve too deep into the realm of indulgent
contrarianism.